Welcome back, Troglodytes, to another edition of the Trogly's Guitar Show. Yes, I've located another one of these rare gems. This is a The Les Paul. They were made in production from 1976 through 1979, but a prototype for this started in 1974 and was released in the 1975 NAMM show. That particular guitar has a lot of history, and we'll go over that again here. But first, this one is a second year, 1977 example. This one is number 39. Now, I've actually owned 5 of these The Les Pauls out of the 77 made, 4 in natural and 1 in the very rare wine red finish that Steve Howe of Yes used to own. Now, the numbers I've had were number 8, 26, which is Steve Howe's, 39 this one, and I did own a consecutive number, number 40, the one that came right after this, and I currently still own number 62. So whenever I get one of these in my hands, I always love documenting it. I'm not going to do the whole tear apart of it, the inside look series, because I've already done that for a wine red and natural version of one of these. So from here on out, if I get one, it'll just be the typical standard video tour and demo, but I will show some photos of the insides as well. Now, the story on this one is that it used to belong to a guitar store owner who got this one in his shop brand new and just kept it for himself. And then a few years ago, he died, willed it to his son sold it to a guitar store, and now I have it. So, a The Les Paul. There's a lot of theories as to why Gibson made these. One popular theory is that this was meant to be the 20th anniversary Les Paul, but it took too long to get it out. They didn't think the 20th anniversary customs did the 20th anniversary justice. They just weren't special enough. Seeing as the prototypes of these did start in 74, that is a decent theory. The other theory is that these were created to celebrate the bicentennial year for America. These guitars are very interesting because they have Austrian maple that is just heavily flamed pretty much everywhere over this guitar. You have your traditional maple top here with beautiful flame. It's 2-piece. You have a heavily flamed maple neck, which is 1-piece. Here's where this guitar gets interesting. The back is also a 2-piece maple, and the sides have the laminate over it as well. So the back and sides are not, as thick as the top. It's a much thinner piece of wood, but that doesn't make it any less. But what's really cool is that the inner core of this guitar is made of mahogany. So it's basically a maple-covered mahogany core body with a maple neck. Now, these guitars are very fancy, but they just have your regular electronics in here. These are your T-top pickups. I really thought they would have like the super humbucking tar backs when I first tore one of these apart, but no, they all have T-tops. They have your fancy TP6 tailpiece. Depending on what year, if you get one of the earlier ones, they won't have this, but they all have the harmonica bridge, which at this point in time was only reserved for high-end guitars, but it kind of started off on things like an SG. Now, besides being covered in maple and absolutely gorgeous and rare, the claim to fame for these The Les Pauls is anything that was plastic is wood. So in this case, we have a headstock veneer that looks wooden-like. You have your wooden truss rod cover. You have a partially wood nut that's kind of scalloped. It's very interesting. You actually have a bunch of different woods in the fretboard. It's kind of hard to see because I oiled it, but you have an ebony rosewood ebony sandwich with very beautiful binding. You have 2 red lines running up it that run under the frets, and then black binding that run over the frets. The switch tip is originally wood on these. This one must have been replaced at some time, gotten broken, because it's a little bit too early in the run for them to have ran out. Because towards the end of the run, they did run out of some of these parts and replace them with brass. Poker chip is wood. All the binding on the guitar is wood. The pickup rings are wood. The pick guard is wood. You have your knobs here, which are also wood. And your input jack plate is also wood. The back control plates were also wooden. So this is just a really beautiful, rare guitar with a lot of wood on it. And that's basically what makes these things so special and ridiculously expensive. Since we've documented a few of these guitars on my channel, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this one. Alright, we'll start with the face of the headstock here. This varies heavily example to example. Some of these have a very dark rosewood veneer over them, whereas some of them are lighter colored. Now, I was interested to find out when I tore this guitar apart to make sure everything was original that this was actually a dark colored one at one point in time. This had to have been sitting in a display stand for a long time to fade the finish over top of it. You can see that it used to be dark because underneath the truss rod cover, you can see it's kind of black along the edges. And if you take the tuners off, the circles around here that the washers are covering are also dark. You can still see some of the dark spots right here, kind of where the shadows were casted. So it's definitely a very interesting piece that has faded over time. You have quite a bit of nice aging to the lacquer as well. Now, when this guitar was shipped to me, unfortunately it did get a little bit of shipping damage. This tuner peg actually broke. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this will stay forever, but I was able to super glue this back together. But definitely be careful when you tune this thing up. Definitely hold it like a sandwich and be very careful to apply even pressure. Now, it's not super brittle. I've used a string winder on it. I think that's probably the best way to make sure the pressure is equal, but that does have a little crack in it that we'll show you here. That's kind of a part you can't replace unless you have somebody custom make you a mother of pearl keystone tuner tip. Condition wise here, you can see up here there is a very small chip out of the headstock. It's not from like the side, it's actually in the center here. It's kind of strange, but it is there. It's kind of like a ding. I mean, the headstock's not breaking apart or anything, but that's probably the worst cosmetic flaw on this guitar. Overall, the headstock's fairly clean, truss rod still works, and the neck is nice and straight. Once again, the nut is kind of scalloped and compensated in between. These are very interesting nuts that Gibson never used again. Again, you have a beautiful ebony rosewood ebony fretboard. I just conditioned it, put some fresh elixir strings on this thing. I always put the elixirs on the very nice guitars. I know elixir's gotten some bad publicity lately, but I still think they're some of the best strings you can buy as far as, you know, really expensive strings that last a little longer. Because on my own personal guitars, I maybe change the strings once a year. I don't play them that much, and I find these elixirs do work a little bit better for those long periods of time. But if you're changing your strings every week, I get it. Elixirs aren't worth it at that point. Frets show very minor wear just from being stored in a case. I mean, I don't think this thing was ever really played. What I really like here is that you do have some eyes in the inlays, just like the Steve Howe guitar. You can see what I'm talking about there. So beautiful abalone inlays. Onto the body here, beautifully flame top. You do have some minor nicks and dings onto the top, but overall this is still a collector's grade example, but it's not perfect. So if you're looking for a perfect one, you'll have to pass on this. There is a very small ding right here. You can see it in the light, but that's probably the worst one on the top, as well as a little bit more wear and tear. Again, you have your T-top pickups in here. They've never been touched. I'm pretty sure I was the first one to even tear this guitar apart. Stock harmonica bridge, TP6 tailpiece. And what's going on with this one is the wooden appointments are a much lighter color on this example. And I kind of like it. It gives it more of a sandy vibe. It's kind of hard to explain without showing you some photos of other ones, but the wooden binding on this one is definitely much lighter colored. And that's just to be, you know, expected, because not all wood's going to be the same color that they made the binding and things out of. Back of the headstock here, serial number is 113077, reg number 39. Now, on some of these The Les Pauls, you have traditional serial numbers under these plaques. And that's one of the first things I always go to check, because it's just fascinating finding ones that have it and some that don't. But this one does have a traditional serial number under there. If you're Made in USA stamp, usually if you have a serial number under there, you'll have that Made in USA stamp. Again, these are your Gibson branded Schaller tuners with your keystone tips here. This is the only Les Paul that Gibson made that had this type of tuner tip. There are the Antique Natural Spotlight Specials in the 335S series that also got pearl tips, but they weren't the same shape. So you can't really find an original replacement part for the one that does have the crack. Huge volute on this guy. That's usually how most of these V Les Pauls are. They have massive volutes. But your neck is nice and slim 60s profile here. And you can see there is some discoloration in the finish right here from a stand. They call that stand rash or a stand burn. Really, this one's not too bad. From far away, you don't really see it, but in these bright lights, you can definitely see there is a difference. But beautiful flame on this one. You can see it's very active and wide. Back of the guitar, once again, two-piece flame maple from Austria. Beautiful movement in this one as well. There's not a lot of wear to the back of the guitar. I'll show you as I shine it in the light. But you do have a little bit of, I would probably call this some more stand wear. Right there you can see. But overall, it's not in too bad of shape. So here you can see the wooden control plates. I really like this one because of this area right here. It's got a lot of like a knot in the wood grain. And this one is also just as beautiful. Take a look at the sides of this guitar. It's also flamed pretty heavily as well, and you can see the wooden binding. And I don't think I've really, highlighted this in any of my other videos. There is that colors underneath it in the binding. There is a red, kind of a natural, and a brown layer. It's kind of hard to see though. Now I do want to make mention here on the original jack plate. This is actually the first jack plate I've taken off on a the Les Paul. And I think I actually put it back in wrong because there's a little chip right here in the wood. And I believe that one used to be right here because there's also a little bit of a discoloration in the wood. I've taken a look under there, that's why I took it off, to make sure there's no real crack. And there's not, there's just kind of a strange discoloration in the wood there and a finished check line. But this input jack plate here is kind of cracking a little bit, you can see. And I was interested to find out that this is the only wooden piece that in the middle, I don't think I'll be able to show you here, there's actually a brass layer, which I found that very interesting. Now this thing has actually come apart. If you take the washer off, the brass is glued in it hold, so it is in two pieces if you ever do take it off. And you can see you've got some more of that stand wear right here, where it kind of made the finish a different color. Here you can see the bottom cap of rosewood. I'm guessing they did that to make it easier to bend the laminate. That way they don't have to make a huge one that goes around the whole entire guitar. Because you got that one right here. You also have another one up here in the cutaway area. So we'll continue around here once again. Got a little bit more of that stand rash on that side. But no major nicks or dings. Got some nice dancing flame. And original strap buttons, yeah. So this guitar is pretty much all original except for the switch tip. I'm not sure what happened to the wooden switch tip. I don't know, maybe this one actually did come with a stock plastic one. It's kind of hard to tell. Because towards the end of the run, they did run out of a few of the wooden parts because Gibson actually outsourced the wooden parts to another company. But I'm thinking 77's too early for that. So the wooden switch tip was likely broken and replaced with a brown one. It really doesn't stick out too much like a sore thumb, but it is a replaced part. And as far as I'm concerned, it's an irreplaceable part. I'm actually kind of talking with a luthier right now. I'm trying to get duplicates made of all the wooden parts. That way, for these examples that have lost their original pieces, we can restore them to how they were supposed to look. Now there are a few scrapes I want to highlight here on the face of the headstock. It looks like maybe a string was on this guitar at one point in time, hanging it by the tuners, and it kind of left an impression line. It's kind of like a small scratch, but those are there and I want you to know about them. But in most lighting situations, they're not highly visible. Once again, you also have that little ding there that stems from that day when whatever happened to it happened. I'd like to re-highlight this area as well in better lighting. There is some light finish checking stemming from the nut, as is very common on these. Those are not actual cracks into the wood. Another finish check I want to point out here is right there, kind of by the plaque. And then there's also a little one right there. Now I took the tuner off of this one. I'll show you some photos here. Those finish splits actually only go right to the tuner's body. I figured they stemmed from here and they kind of cracked up, but no, it just comes from the tuner body and out. So definitely nothing to worry about, but something to definitely know about. Go over the body here one more time. Here's that small little ding I was talking about earlier. You do have that there. That's probably the biggest flaw on the front of the body. But as you can see in regular lighting situations, it just kind of looks like part of the wood grain. But when you catch it in the light just right, you can see it. There's another one of those right there. It's kind of like a white dot under normal lighting situations. And here's that, looks like a wood chip that's under the finish or something. I'm not quite sure what that is. But this guitar really is a beautiful kind of a sandy blonde. It's the light colored binding and wooden parts that really set this one apart. So the Les Paul, are they worth $20,000 as a playing guitar? No. These are kind of functional pieces of art. That's why they sell for so much money. If you can afford one, I will tell you they are nice sounding guitars. They're a little bit bright, but definitely still tameable. So I would suggest trying one of these if you ever see one. Alright, time to take a look under Blacklight here. You can see everything's pretty well good on the face of the headstock, but there is that very small lacquer chip there, as well as the other dings on the top. Once again, they're not necessarily cracks, but there is a little piece of wood missing at the very top. So it must have been hit against something at some point in time. And there's not much you can really tell under Blacklight on fretboards, but we'll take a look anyways here. Now the face of the guitar. You can see you've got a very small ding right there underneath the rhythm trebled poker chip there, as well as a tiny one at the top. Looks like a very small blemish right there as well. That's what I like about these Blacklight demos, is that they really help you show any small imperfection on a rare guitar like this. There's that ding I was talking about earlier, probably the biggest one on the guitar. You also have a small one right there. There's a little bit of discoloration in the finish right there as well. It's right there, but no breaks, cracks, or repairs. Small ding there. Now the wood parts do have some lacquer over them, but like on the pickguard, there's only some on the back, as they usually do. And I can't quite figure out what that is, if that one's a ding. It almost looks like it's a little wood shaving that's underneath the finish. And you've got just a little bit of wear there. Again, we'll take a look at the top here. There's that very small chip in the wood, and then just a little bit of edge wear. And there you can quite clearly see the crack that is still prevalent on that tuner. I mean, it does function okay as of right now, but I can't guarantee that the super glue will hold forever. You can see you got a small little ding right there underneath the serial number. But thankfully, no repairs. As far as I know, the Heart one is the only one that has a headstock break. But I'm sure there's a few other ones out there that met a terrible fate in shipping. I do want to mention there are a few small checking lines from the nut. You can see right there, but definitely not, into the wood or anything. The back of the neck here, you can see the wood grain running perpendicular to the flame. That's why I always really like these examples. And there you can see that stand rash a little better as well. And the back of the guitar. I mean, this thing blacklights perfectly. And once again, small little ding there. And a little bit of discoloration. I'm guessing that's from a different type of stand. The ones that kind of have a backing support right there. So that's what it looks like to me, is some stand rash. Because the other area it would have hit would have been the wooden plate here, but it hit it very well. Sides of the guitar, looking in pretty good shape for the most part. Maybe a little bit of light edge wear there, but nothing too bad. And the other side here. I mean, overall, this is a fairly clean example. It's not perfect. And right there, that area that doesn't blacklight, there's actually a little bit of felt stuck to the guitar because it's sat in that case for so long. And you got a small ding there on the side. There you can see the chip in the input jack plate. It's really just like in the clear coat. It's not necessarily the wood missing, but it is there and it is a flaw. And you've got that slight darker spot in the wood. It's not an actual crack. There is a finish check there though. And here you can see that stand rash again. We'll take a look here on the other side. Once again, you have some stand rash. Now, if you're a rock star and you're looking for a really beautiful Les Paul to gig and you want a the Les Paul, this is actually one I'd suggest getting because it is the lightest example I've had. It's just a hair over 10 pounds, which is really good for all of this maple on the guitar. Most of my other examples are usually in that high 10 to the 11, almost 12 pound range. If you switch out that TP6 tailpiece for a lightweight tailpiece, you could actually get this one under 10 pounds. Now, the Les Pauls are fairly well known for coming in a case called an Artist Series case. It's also public knowledge that not all of them came in one. I'm guessing this one likely did, and the store owner that owned it at the time, for whatever reason, didn't keep the original case. The case that this guitar came to me in was kind of a early 80s Gibson case, but I switched it out for this Generation 3 chainsaw case because likely I'm going to have to ship this guitar somewhere, and these are my favorite cases to ship a guitar in. They're a little bit bulkier, they take up more room in the package, and I think are a little bit more protective. But this is a Generation 3 Gibson chainsaw case. You can see it's a large molded plastic case. They're very nice. Their handles are built in. You don't have to worry about them falling apart. And they have the metal latches. And all three of them are still currently present on this one. You've got some scratches on the outside, but inside is a beautiful 70s and 80s brown interior. The hinges are still good, so the case is still suspended in the air, but you do not have a lid ribbon on this one. But nice plush example. It's a great fit. I had just purchased this case separately, and honestly, I don't think there's a better guitar to put it in. You have a little compartment in here, and in here there is a little sliver of the mother of pearl tuner that I couldn't get to fit back in right, so that is wrapped up in there. If it ever does break and you want to put it together, 100% correct. This is a really nice fit. Left and right, no movement. Up and down, no movement. You got nice headstock clearance. It does touch down, but there's a thick foam pad, so I'm not worried about that. Now, the original Artist Series case looks like that top one or the back one over there. That's where the other the Les Pauls are sleeping currently. And honestly, they're not as good of cases. They're just kind of pretty, but they're awful for protection. So I think the Generation 3 is a much better case. However, occasionally an Artist Series case does pop up for sale separately. Don't pay a scalper's price, anywhere from $500 to $1,000. I know I've sold a few for myself, and I usually can get around $300 for them. Unless, it's a really fine example, then I would suggest the most you should pay is $500. The cleans will be running through a Gibson Super Gold Tone GA30RV. The dirty tones come from a Marshall JMP 1C. Troglytes for tuning in to this special edition of the Trogly's Guitar Show. If you think you might be interested in being the next owner of this very rare Les Paul from the 70s, feel free to contact me on my Facebook page, facebook.com/Troglys, Troglys, or check out the Reverb listing. Thank you, Troglytes, for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.